Here's a question about a farmer who can plant two crops. We're given information on constraints and what the profit is. And of course, the question is to find out what planting strategy to use to maximize the profit. So read through the question carefully and make sure you understand all the details. And go ahead and start to think about how you would set up the problem to get to the initial simplex tableau, which you would use to solve using the simplex method. You will let X represent the acres planted in corn, Y represent the acres planted in soybeans, and you'll want to read through the question very carefully to make sure you understand that these are the three constraints and that this is the profit function. The three constraints, one of them is a expenses constraint based on the amount of money she has. That's this one. There's the storage constraint based on the amount of available storage and the amount required by each of the two crops. And finally, there's the land constraint. She has only 480 acres. So the acres planted in corn plus the acres planted in soybeans cannot exceed that available acreage. So just, again, make sure that you have a good understanding of how to go from the word problem to this expression of the three constraint inequalities and this expression for the function that you're maximizing. So for the three constraints, the land constraint, the dollar constraint, and the storage constraint, we introduce a slack variable in each. U would represent unused acres of land, V would represent unused dollars spent, and W would represent unused storage space. Put that together with the profit function, and these are the equations that go into the initial simplex tableau. So make absolutely certain that you understand how to get from the original word problem to this initial simplex tableau. We're now going to go to the tableau and do the row operations to find the optimal solution. We're looking at a standard problem. The most negative number in the bottom row is the minus 90. We have to check the ratios. 1 into 480 is 480. 100 into 20,000 is 200. 40 into 19,200 is going to be more than the previous one because this divisor is so much smaller. So 100 into 20,000 is going to give us the smallest positive ratio, which means the 100 becomes our pivot element. We want to pivot, converting that to a 1 and the other numbers in that column to a 0. By selecting that and clicking pivot on selection, the matrix row operations tool will do that for us. So we've now completed the first step of the simplex method. We're not finished. We might stop and think about where we are here. At this point, we're at the solution which would represent planting no corn, planting 200 acres in soybeans, and letting 280 acres of land lie unplanted. So how am I getting that? X is 0 because the column is not in unit form. Y is 200, and U is 280, and remember U was unused land. So we're using all our capital and we're using all our storage space. 280 acres of land not used, and our profit would be $18,000 if we did that. But we're not at the optimal solution. We still have a negative in the bottom row. So we have to check for the next pivot element in the first column this time. 40 into that would be, well, let's do the easy ones first. A half into 280 compared with a half into 200. 200 is smaller than 280. So this ratio, a half into 200, will be smaller than the ratio up here would be. And that is a half into 200 would be 400. Let's see, 40 into this would be 4 into 1120. That's going to be less, actually. Check these out with your calculator if you want to, but you'll find that 40 into 11,200 gives us our smallest ratio. So that's going to be my pivot element. Pivot on selection. And we're now done. No negatives in the bottom row. So we're now at the optimal solution, for which acres in corn, X, is 280. Acres in soybeans, Y, is 60. And the profit is 22,200. So let's think about the slack variables. The slack variable U, which is unused land, is 140 acres. See, we're planting 280 acres in corn, 60 acres in soybeans, so that's a total of 340 acres we're planting. The other 140 acres is not used. And all the storage space and capital is used. Let's take our final simplex tableau and go back to the context of the original question. How many acres of corn do we plant? X is corn. 280 acres of corn. That goes here. Acres of soybeans. Y is our soybeans. Here's the 1 in the Y column. 60 acres of soybeans is what we plant. What will her profit be if she follows this strategy? The maximum profit, here's the 1 in the P column, $22,200. So that would be her profit. We're not asked the question here about unused land, but if we were, we can look at the final tableau and see that U in the final tableau corresponds to 140. So there would be 140 acres of land that are not planted. But of course, that's a consequence of simply realizing that you've planted only 340 acres of land out of the 480 that we had. So if we were asked how much land would lie fallow, it would be 140 acres.